In March 2004, Madison Cole walked out of a Fort Lauderdale hotel at 10:23 p.m. to take a phone call. Security cameras captured her passing through the automatic doors, purse over her shoulder, flip-flops clicking on the pavement. She was smiling. 20 minutes later, she was gone. Her father, Richard, arrived in Florida 12 hours later with missing person flyers and a private investigator. He spent 6 months searching, then 6 years, then 20. In March 2024, a 19-year-old barista in Seattle posted a TikTok video about her weirdest coffee orders. In the background, a woman in sunglasses waited for her latte. The facial recognition filter flagged her face and suggested a tag, Madison Cole, missing since 2004. When the FBI finally reached her, she was living under a new name. She was married. She had 3 children. And when they asked why she disappeared, she said 5 words, "Please don't tell my father." What investigators would discover wasn't a kidnapping or a murder. It was something far more disturbing. Because Madison Cole didn't run from a stranger. She ran from the person who was supposed to protect her, and she'd been hiding in plain sight for 20 years, building a life from nothing, while her father searched for a daughter who had chosen to stay dead. March 15, 2004, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Spring break. The beaches were packed with college students from across the country, celebrating freedom and youth under the Florida sun. Among them was Madison Cole, 21, a junior at Northwestern University studying journalism, blonde, athletic, with the kind of easy smile that made her popular in every group. She'd driven down from Chicago with 3 roommates, packed into a Honda Civic with more enthusiasm than luggage space. Her father, Richard Cole, had been reluctant to let her go. "Fort Lauderdale during spring break," he'd said when she asked permission. "That's not safe for young women." "Dad, I'm 21, Madison had replied, rolling her eyes in that universal language of daughters who think their fathers worry too much. "I'll be with Emma, Sarah, and Jen the whole time. We're staying at a hotel with security. I'll call you every night." Richard had eventually agreed, but only after Madison promised to check in daily and avoid going anywhere alone. She kept that promise for exactly 4 days. March 19, 2004 was the last time anyone saw Madison Cole. According to her roommates, Madison had gone to the hotel lobby around 10 p.m. to use the business center computer. She wanted to email a professor about extending a deadline for a paper she hadn't finished before leaving for break. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, she'd told Emma, who was getting ready for a night out. "Save me some of those chips." Emma remembered that detail because she'd eaten all the chips while waiting. By 11 p.m., when Madison still hadn't returned, Emma went looking. The business center was empty. The computer Madison had used was off. The hotel's front desk said they hadn't seen her leave. Security footage showed Madison entering the business center at 10:07 p.m. At 10:23 p.m., she was seen walking through the lobby toward the front entrance. She was alone, carrying her purse, and appeared to be on her cell phone. Then she walked out the automatic doors and disappeared. The Fort Lauderdale Police Department launched an immediate search. Hotels were canvassed, beach areas combed, local hospitals checked. Madison's cell phone records showed her last call had been to a number that turned out to be disconnected, a burner phone that was never found. Richard Cole arrived in Florida within 12 hours. He brought missing person flyers, a private investigator, and the kind of desperate determination that comes from knowing something terrible has happened to your child. Madison wouldn't just leave, he told police repeatedly. "She's responsible. She's careful. Someone took her." The investigation revealed troubling details. Madison had withdrawn $800 from an ATM near the hotel at 9:45 p.m., unusual because she rarely carried that much cash. Witnesses reported seeing her talking to a man in his 30s near the hotel pool earlier that day, though descriptions were vague and no one could identify him. After 6 months of searching, the case went cold. No body, no witnesses, no leads, just a college student who walked out of a hotel and vanished into the Florida night. Richard Cole never stopped looking. He hired investigators, posted on missing persons forums, and kept Madison's case active on every social media platform that emerged over the next 2 decades. But Madison Cole remained missing, until a 19-year-old college student in Seattle named Zoe Chen posted a TikTok video in March 2024. Zoe Chen wasn't looking for missing persons when she posted the video. She was just documenting her part-time job at a coffee shop in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. The video was simple. POV, you're a barista, and these are the wildest drink orders you get. She'd filmed herself making elaborate coffee drinks while customers waited in the background, just another day at work. She used a popular filter that identified faces in the video and suggested tags based on facial recognition. It was meant to be fun. The app would sometimes hilariously misidentify people as celebrities or historical figures, but this time the algorithm flagged something unusual. One of the customers in the background, a woman in her 40s wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, was tagged with a link to a missing persons database. The name that appeared, Madison Cole, missing since 2004. Zoe almost ignored it. The woman in her video was clearly too old to be a college student, but something made her click through to the missing persons listing. The age-progressed photo showed what Madison Cole might look like at 41. The facial structure matched the woman in Zoe's video almost perfectly. Zoe posted about it in the comments. "Guys, this is weird. The face recognition app is saying this customer might be a missing person from 2004. Should I report this?" The video went viral within hours. True crime enthusiasts began analyzing the footage frame by frame. Someone enhanced the image quality and confirmed that the facial features, distance between eyes, nose shape, ear structure, were consistent with Madison Cole's photos. Within 24 hours, the FBI was involved. Special Agent Rachel Morrison, who specialized in cold cases, was assigned to investigate. She obtained the full video from Zoe and ran it through the FBI's facial recognition database. The match was 94% certain. But when Morrison traced the woman's identity through the coffee shop's loyalty program she'd paid with a registered card, she found something that complicated everything. The woman's name was Amanda Thompson. She lived in Bellevue, Washington, a suburb of Seattle. She was married to David Thompson, a software engineer. They had 3 children, ages 12, 10, and 7, and according to public records, Amanda Thompson had existed since 2005, 1 year after Madison Cole disappeared. "We need to approach this carefully," Morrison told her team. "If this is Madison Cole, there's a reason she's been living under a false identity for 20 years. We need to understand why before we expose her." Morrison spent 2 weeks building a case file. She obtained Amanda Thompson's driver's license photo, another facial recognition match. She reviewed medical records. Dental x-rays were consistent with Madison Cole's from 2003. She even analyzed video footage of Amanda Thompson at her children's school events, comparing her mannerisms and gait to old videos of Madison Cole. Everything pointed to the same conclusion: Amanda Thompson was Madison Cole. But before Morrison could make contact, Richard Cole found out. Someone had leaked the story to a true crime podcast. Within days, Richard Cole was on the phone with the FBI, demanding to know if they'd found his daughter. Morrison had no choice but to tell him the truth. "Yes, we believe we've located Madison. But Mr. Cole, there are complications." Richard Cole was on a plane to Seattle that night. Amanda Thompson was loading groceries into her minivan when she saw him. After 20 years, she recognized her father immediately. The same tall frame, though more stooped now. The same serious expression that had intimidated her boyfriends in high school. The same eyes that had always seemed to see through every lie she told. Their eyes met across the parking lot. Amanda froze. A box of cereal slipped from her hands and hit the pavement, but she didn't notice. Richard Cole walked toward her slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. "Madison?" His voice cracked on her name. "I'm Amanda," she said automatically. Then, softer, "Please don't do this here, my kids. Your kids." Richard stopped walking. "You have children?" Amanda glanced toward the store entrance where her 3 children were arguing over who got to push the shopping cart. "Dad, I can explain, but not here, please." The emotion on Richard's face was indescribable. Relief, rage, confusion, joy, all fighting for dominance. "You're alive. Jesus Christ, Madison, you're alive. I know this is, I can't, please." Amanda was shaking now. "Come to my house. Tonight, after the kids are asleep. I'll tell you everything." 20 years, Richard said, his voice rising. 20 years I've been searching for you. 20 years of thinking you were dead. And you've been here, living a normal life? "It's not." Amanda took a breath. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it." Amanda wrote her address on the back of a receipt and handed it to him. 8 p.m. Come alone. "And Dad," she met his eyes. "Don't tell David you're coming. Don't tell anyone where I am. Not yet." That night, Richard Cole sat across from his daughter in a living room filled with family photos. Photos where Madison Cole didn't exist. Where Amanda Thompson smiled with children who shouldn't have been born. with a husband who shouldn't have existed. Start talking, Richard said. Amanda poured them both coffee with shaking hands. I need you to understand something first. I didn't fake my disappearance to hurt you. I did it to survive. Survive what? Amanda set down the coffee pot and looked at her father directly for the first time in 20 years. You. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. What are you talking about? Richard's face had gone pale. Do you remember Mom's accident? Amanda asked. The car accident when I was 16? Of course I remember. Your mother died. She didn't die in an accident, Dad. She drove into that bridge on purpose, because she couldn't live with what you'd done to her. Richard stood up abruptly. That's not. Your mother was depressed. She was getting help. She was depressed because you controlled every aspect of her life, Amanda said, her voice steady now. Where she went, who she talked to, what she wore. You tracked her phone. You monitored her emails. You convinced her she was crazy when she tried to leave. I protected your mother. You terrorized her. Amanda's voice broke, and after she died, you started doing the same thing to me. Richard sank back into his chair. I was trying to keep you safe. You were trying to keep me trapped. Amanda wiped her eyes. Do you know why I went to Northwestern? Because it was 500 miles away from you. Do you know why I stayed in the dorms even though you wanted me to commute? Because I needed to breathe. That's not fair. I gave you everything. You gave me a prison with nice furniture, Amanda said. And when I went to Florida for spring break, I was finally free. Really free. And I realized I could never go back. Richard's hands were trembling. So you faked your disappearance? Let me think you were dead for 20 years? I met someone in Florida, a woman who ran a domestic violence shelter. I told her about you, about Mom, about the control, about how I was terrified of what would happen when I graduated, and you expected me to move back home. Amanda took a shaky breath. She helped me, got me a new identity, new social security number, new life. I know it was cruel. I know what I put you through. But Dad, I couldn't think of any other way to escape. I never hit you, Richard said quietly. There are other ways to hurt people, Amanda replied. Mom knew that. That's why she chose the bridge. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Richard spoke. The money you withdrew from the ATM, the disconnected phone number, all planned, Amanda confirmed. I had help from people who knew how to make someone disappear. The man I was seen talking to at the pool, he was a volunteer from the shelter. He gave me the burner phone and instructions on how to leave without being traced. And Northwestern? Your friends? Your whole life? I had to leave it all behind. That was the price of freedom. Richard looked around the room again, at the photos of birthday parties and soccer games and family vacations, at the life his daughter had built without him. Do they know? He asked. Your husband, your kids, do they know you're not Amanda Thompson? David knows, Amanda said. I told him before we got married. He's known the whole time. But the kids, she shook her head. They think I'm who I say I am. They deserve to know their mother is a liar. And they will, Amanda said firmly, when they're old enough to understand, when I can explain why I had to do it. Richard stood up again. This time he walked to the window, staring out at the dark Seattle street. You think I'm a monster. I think you're sick, Amanda said. I think you've spent your whole life confusing control with love. And I think Mom tried to tell you that, but you couldn't hear it. I loved your mother. I know you did, in your own way. But love isn't supposed to feel like suffocation. Richard turned to face her. What happens now? Amanda met his eyes. That depends on you. Special Agent Rachel Morrison sat in her car outside Amanda Thompson's house, watching Richard Cole through the windshield. He'd been standing on the porch for 10 minutes, hand on the doorknob, unable to turn it. Finally, he opened the door and stepped inside. Morrison checked her watch, 8:03 p.m. She'd give them until 11 before knocking. Her phone buzzed, a text from her supervisor. CNN is running the story in 20 minutes. Get ahead of it or we're fucked. Morrison dialed the news desk. This is Special Agent Morrison, FBI. I need you to kill the Madison Cole story. We have confirmation from 3 sources. You have a woman who's been hiding from domestic abuse for 20 years. If you put her location on national television, you're making her a target. The public has a right to know. The public has a right to watch you get sued for endangering a victim. Morrison hung up. The call didn't work. By 8:30 p.m., Madison Cole's face was on every screen in America. Inside the house, Amanda's phone started ringing, then David's, then the house phone they never used. Don't answer, Amanda said, but David was already looking at his laptop. We're trending on Twitter, he said quietly. Someone posted our address. Amanda's hands started shaking. The kids are asleep upstairs. David closed the laptop. I'll pack bags, we can leave tonight. Richard stood up. Where will you go? Anywhere that isn't here. Amanda was pulling photo albums off shelves, grabbing her children's favorite stuffed animals. You don't understand. Once people know where you are, you're not safe anymore. I can protect you. Amanda spun around. You're the reason I had to disappear in the first place. The shout hung in the air. Upstairs, a door opened. Small footsteps on the landing. Mommy? Claire's voice, sleepy and confused. Why are you yelling? Amanda closed her eyes, took a breath. Everything's fine, sweetie. Go back to bed. Who's that man? Amanda looked at Richard, at the grandfather her daughter had never met. That's an old friend of Mommy's. We'll talk about it in the morning. After Claire went back to bed, Amanda sank onto the couch. You need to leave. Madison, my name is Amanda. Her voice was flat, exhausted. Madison Cole died in Florida in 2004. You need to grieve her and leave Amanda Thompson alone. Richard moved toward the door, then stopped. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I didn't understand what I was doing. Your mother never told me. She tried. Amanda wasn't looking at him. Every time she did, you told her she was being dramatic, that you were just worried, that other husbands were so much worse. I was trying. I know what you were trying to do. That's what makes it worse. You really believed you were helping. Morrison was on her fourth cup of gas station coffee when Richard emerged at 11:17 p.m. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. Mr. Cole, she stepped out of her vehicle. We need to talk. She hates me. She's scared. That's different. Richard leaned against his rental car. Morrison noticed his hands were shaking. I keep thinking about her mother, he said. Helen, she'd been asking for marriage counseling for months before the accident. I thought she was being... I told her we didn't need strangers interfering in our family business. Morrison had read the accident report. Helen Cole had driven into a concrete barrier at 65 miles per hour on a straight road in clear weather. No skid marks, no attempt to brake. Mr. Cole, I need to ask you some questions for the official record. Do you understand that Amanda Thompson has committed several federal crimes, identity fraud, social security fraud? Are you going to arrest her? Morrison watched him carefully. That depends on several factors. Intent, duress, whether she posed a threat to others. But I need to understand what she was running from. She thinks I'm an abuser. Are you? The question landed like a slap. Richard's face crumpled. I never hit them. I never screamed. I needed to know they were safe. After Helen died, Madison was all I had left. The thought of something happening to her, so you tracked her phone, just to make sure she was where she said she'd be. You called her roommates to verify her location. To make sure she was safe, you installed monitoring software on her laptop. Richard was quiet. Mr. Cole, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've interviewed hundreds of domestic abusers. You want to know what they all have in common? He looked up. They all thought they were the good guys, the protectors, the ones who cared more than anyone else. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. Control doesn't become love just because you mean well. 3 days later, Morrison sat in a conference room at the FBI field office in Seattle. The walls were covered with printouts, Amanda's timeline, Richard's documentation, medical records from Helen Cole's autopsy. Her supervisor, Assistant Director Chen, was not happy. Let me get this straight, Chen pointed at the evidence boards. We found a woman who's been wanted for identity fraud for 20 years. She's committed multiple federal crimes, and you want to give her immunity. She was fleeing domestic abuse, psychological abuse that we can't prove. Richard Cole has no criminal record, no history of violence, no restraining orders, because his wife killed herself before she could file one. Morrison's voice rose, because his daughter was so terrified of him that she faked her own death, or because she wanted to avoid student loans and start fresh. We've seen it before. Morrison pulled out a thick file. I interviewed Amanda's college roommates, her professors, her high school friends. Every single one of them described Richard Cole the same way: intense, overprotective, controlling. She opened the file. Emma Rodriguez, college roommate. Madison's dad called our dorm room 3 times a day. If she didn't answer, he'd call campus security to check on her. Another page. Professor James Mitchell. Madison was a brilliant student, but she turned down a summer internship at the Chicago Tribune because her father didn't want her staying in the city alone. Another. Sarah Chen, high school friend. Madison's mom drove into that bridge on purpose. Everyone knew it, but Madison couldn't talk about it because her dad said it would dishonor her mother's memory. Chen leaned back in his chair. Okay, I'm listening. Coercive control is a form of domestic abuse. It's illegal in the UK, Canada, and several US states. Richard Cole isolated his daughter, monitored her movements, and used guilt and fear to maintain control over her life. When Helen Cole couldn't escape, she chose suicide. When Madison Cole couldn't escape, she chose to disappear. And you want to give her a pass on federal crimes because of that. I want to acknowledge that she was a 21-year-old girl with limited options who made a desperate choice. She didn't hurt anyone. She didn't steal anyone's identity. The shelter helped her create a new one from scratch. She's lived a law-abiding life for 20 years. She has 3 children who don't know their mother is a fugitive. Chen studied the evidence boards. What about Cole? Does he face charges? For what? Being an overbearing father. We can't prosecute someone for psychological abuse if the victim never reported it. So everyone walks. Amanda gets legal name change, legitimizes her current identity. Richard gets a very expensive education in what he did wrong. Morrison closed the file, and we update our protocols for missing persons cases to screen for domestic abuse before we reunite families. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then, write up the recommendation. I'll take it to the director. Morrison called Amanda that night. We're not pressing charges. The silence on the other end lasted so long, Morrison thought the call had dropped. Amanda, I thought I've spent 20 years waiting for this call, for someone to find me and drag me back. No one's dragging you anywhere. Your identity will be legitimized through legal channels. Your kids' birth certificates will be amended. You'll be Amanda Thompson legally. And my father? That's between you and him. But Amanda, he's been making calls to therapists, to domestic abuse organizations, to people who work with controlling partners. I think he's trying. Trying isn't the same as changing. No, but it's a start. After Morrison hung up, she opened her laptop and started typing the case report that would change how the FBI handled missing persons investigations. Subject, Madison Cole / Amanda Thompson. Case closure report. Recommendation, no prosecution. Subject was fleeing coercive control and psychological abuse. Disappeared identity created under duress with assistance from domestic violence resources. Subject has maintained law-abiding life under assumed identity for 20 years. 3 minor children involved. Prosecution not in public interest. Secondary recommendation. FBI update missing persons protocols to include domestic abuse screening before family reunification. Implement training on coercive control and psychological abuse patterns. She attached the files from Amanda's case, from Richard's interviews, from the dozens of people who described a family that looked perfect from the outside while dying from the inside. Then she added one more paragraph. Note, this case highlights a critical gap in how we understand domestic abuse. Physical violence is not the only form of captivity. Madison Cole was not kidnapped by a stranger. She was held prisoner by a father who believed control was love. Her disappearance was not a crime. It was an escape. We need to recognize that sometimes the people looking for the missing are the reason they disappeared in the first place. The story broke differently the second time, not as missing woman found alive after 20 years, but as woman who faked death to escape father speaks out about coercive control. Amanda gave one interview to a journalist who specialized in domestic abuse stories. She sat with her face in shadow, voice disguised, protecting the life she'd built. People think abuse has to leave bruises, Amanda said, but my father never hit me. He just made it clear that my autonomy was negotiable, that his need to feel secure was more important than my need to breathe. The interviewer asked, "Do you regret the way you disappeared? The pain you caused your father?" Amanda was quiet for a long time. "I regret that a 21-year-old girl felt so trapped that faking her own death seemed like the only option. I regret that my mother felt so hopeless she drove into a bridge. I regret that neither of us felt we could just leave. Do you blame your father? I blame a system that taught him ownership was love, that taught my mother her feelings were less important than keeping peace, that taught me I owed him access to my life because he paid for my education. Have you spoken to him since? We're in family therapy. He's in individual therapy. My husband and I are in couples therapy to deal with the trauma of all this becoming public." Amanda's shadowed silhouette shifted. "People keep asking if I forgive him. But that's not the question. The question is, can he recognize what he did? Can he understand that good intentions don't erase harm? And can he ask me in 5 years? The interview went viral for different reasons than the TikTok video. Comments sections exploded with people sharing their own stories. My mother tracked my location until I was 30. I thought it was normal. My dad had a camera in my college dorm for safety. I didn't realize that was abuse until I read this story. I'm reading this and realizing I do some of these things to my daughter. Holy shit. The National Domestic Violence Hotline reported a 300% increase in calls about coercive control in the week after Amanda's interview aired. 2 states introduced legislation to criminalize psychological abuse, and Richard Cole watched the interview alone in his apartment, taking notes. When it ended, he opened his journal, the one his therapist had recommended, and wrote, "Madison said I taught her that love looks like surveillance, that protection requires imprisonment. I don't remember teaching her that. But I remember installing the GPS on her car just in case. I remember calling her roommates to check in. I remember telling Helen that marriage counseling was airing our dirty laundry. I thought I was keeping them safe. But safe from what? From making their own choices? From living their own lives? My wife drove into a bridge because I loved her too much. My daughter faked her death because I cared too much. How do you come back from that? How do you apologize for destroying people with good intentions? My therapist says healing starts with acknowledgement. So here it is. My name is Richard Cole, and I was an abusive father. I never hit anyone. I never screamed. But I made it clear that their freedom was less important than my fear. And when they tried to leave, I made it impossible. Madison, if you ever read this, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just trying to understand what I did so I never do it again. To anyone. And I'm sorry. Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry." He closed the journal and stared at his phone. Amanda had agreed to a video call next month, with her therapist present. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't redemption, but it was more than he deserved. And maybe that was the point. 6 months after the TikTok video that changed everything, Amanda Thompson sat in her therapist's office, trying to articulate feelings she'd buried for 20 years. "I thought I'd feel relief," she said. "That was the goal, right? Escape, build a new life, be free, and I was free. For 20 years, I lived without looking over my shoulder. But I also lived without my history, without my friends from college, without anyone who knew Madison Cole. I created Amanda Thompson from nothing, and some days I wasn't sure which one was real. The revelation of her identity had forced Amanda to integrate 2 decades of compartmentalized existence. Her children now knew their mother had once been someone else. Her husband, who'd always known, now had to explain it to curious neighbors. And Richard Cole was in therapy of his own, 600 miles away, trying to understand how love had curdled into control. The case had sparked a national conversation. Domestic abuse organizations praised Amanda's courage while acknowledging the privilege involved in her escape, access to resources, help from strangers, the ability to create a new identity. Most abuse survivors can't just disappear, one advocate pointed out during a news interview. They don't have the money, the connections, or the luxury of walking away from everything. Amanda Thompson's story is inspiring, but it's also exceptional. The TikTok video had been viewed 50 million times. Zoe Chen, the barista who'd posted it, had become an unlikely spokesperson for digital privacy and facial recognition ethics. "I'm glad I helped reunite a family," Zoe said in an interview. "But I also think about how easily someone could be found who doesn't want to be found. What if Madison hadn't wanted to be identified? What if she was hiding from someone dangerous?" The coffee shop where Amanda was filmed had installed new policies about recording customers. Several states introduced legislation limiting the use of facial recognition technology by private citizens. But for Amanda Thompson, the genie was out of the bottle. Madison Cole existed again, whether she wanted her to or not. "The hardest part," Amanda told her therapist, "is explaining to my kids why Grandpa Richard can only visit once a year, why we're not going to move closer to him, why there are boundaries, because boundaries are healthy," Dr. Chen said. "I know, but they're 12, 10, and 7. They don't understand why their grandfather, who seems so nice on video calls, isn't someone we can trust to babysit." Amanda's oldest daughter, Claire, had been asking questions. Why did Mom change her name? Why did she leave her old family? Was she going to leave them too? "I'm trying to explain it in age-appropriate ways," Amanda said, "that sometimes adults make choices to protect themselves, that sometimes love looks like distance rather than closeness. How does Richard respond to the boundaries? He's trying, Amanda admitted. He's in therapy. He's reading books about enmeshment and control. He sent me a letter last month apologizing for specific things, like the GPS tracker, like calling my college roommates, like making mom feel like she couldn't leave. That's progress. It is. But I also know that abusive patterns take decades to form and decades to change. I'm not going to rush into a relationship just because he's my biological father. Meanwhile, Richard Cole had become an unlikely advocate for recognizing psychological abuse. He gave talks at domestic violence prevention conferences, always beginning with the same admission. My name is Richard Cole, and I was an abusive husband and father. I never hit anyone. I never screamed. But I controlled every aspect of their lives until one of them killed herself, and the other faked her own death to escape me. The raw honesty was shocking. Audiences didn't know whether to applaud or look away. I thought I was protecting my family, Richard would continue. But protection without autonomy is just imprisonment with nice furniture. My daughter said that to me, and she was right. Some praised his accountability. Others questioned whether he was using his daughter's trauma to rehabilitate his own reputation. Amanda tried not to follow the media coverage. She was busy being a mother, a wife, a woman building a life that finally belonged to her. But sometimes, late at night, she'd pull up old photos of Madison Cole, the college student with her whole life ahead of her. The girl who'd thought running away was the only option. "Do you regret it?" her husband David asked one night, finding her looking at the photos. "Which part? Disappearing, living as someone else, missing 20 years with your father?" Amanda thought about it. "I regret that I had to. I regret that a 21-year-old girl felt so trapped she had to fake her own death. But I don't regret the life we built. I don't regret our kids or our home, or the fact that I can breathe without someone monitoring every breath. What about now that he knows? Now," Amanda said slowly, "I get to decide what kind of relationship we have, not him. That's what I bought with 20 years of disappearance, the right to choose." The TikTok video was eventually taken down at Amanda's request, but not before it had been saved, reposted, and analyzed by millions of people. Zoe Chen used her viral fame to launch a podcast about digital privacy and the ethics of facial recognition. Madison Cole's story has a relatively happy ending, she'd say in each episode. But what about the people hiding from abusers, stalkers, or violent ex-partners? Do we really want a world where anyone can be found by anyone else? The coffee shop where Amanda was identified became a minor tourist attraction. People would come in asking if this was the Madison Cole place, much to the staff's annoyance. But for the Thompson family, life slowly returned to a new normal. Claire, the oldest daughter, wrote an essay for school about her mother's bravery. Amanda cried when she read it. Richard Cole continued his therapy and his advocacy work. He'd sent Amanda a letter asking if she'd ever consider letting him meet his grandchildren in person. She hadn't responded yet. "I'm thinking about it," she told Dr. Chen in therapy. "But I'm also okay with taking my time. I've spent 20 years learning to trust my own judgment. I'm not going to rush into anything just because society says I should forgive my father." The case had changed how law enforcement approached missing persons investigations. A new protocol was established. Before sharing identifying information about found individuals, investigators would assess whether they might be hiding from abuse. Madison Cole taught us something important. Special Agent Morrison said in a training seminar, "Not everyone who's missing wants to be found, and sometimes the people looking for them are the reason they disappeared in the first place." On March 19, 2024, exactly 20 years after Madison Cole walked out of a Florida hotel, Amanda Thompson sat on her back porch, watching her children play in the yard. She thought about the college girl who'd made the hardest decision of her life, who'd walked away from everything she knew because staying felt like dying. She thought about her mother, who'd made a different choice, who'd chosen a bridge instead of a new identity, and she thought about the fact that both women had been trying to solve the same problem. How do you escape someone who believes their control is love? Amanda's phone buzzed. A text from her father. "I understand if you never forgive me, but I want you to know I'm proud of the life you built. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Amanda stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed, "Maybe we can schedule a video call next month, with my therapist present. We can start there." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start, and after 20 years of hiding, Amanda Thompson, formerly Madison Cole, was finally learning that she didn't have to run anymore. She could stand still and choose what came next.